So continuing on with this middle period of the Buddha's life. And so, sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya as well as the Udana. Thus have I heard. At one time, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the eastern park, the palace of Megara's mother. On that occasion, he had risen from retreat in the evening, and he was sitting outside the gatehouse in the porch. Then King Pasanno of Kosala came up to him, and after paying homage, he sat down at one side. But just then, 7 matted hair ascetics, 7 niganta, 7 naked ascetics, 7 single garment ascetics, and 7 wanderers, all with long hair and nails and carrying a variety of monks' outfits, went by not far from the Blessed One. King Pasanno got up from his seat, and after arranging his robe on one shoulder, he knelt down with his right knee on the ground. Then, raising his hands, palms together, towards the ascetics, he pronounced his own name, "Lords, I am Pasanno, King of Kosala," 3 times. Soon after they had passed, he went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side. He said, "Lord, are any of these among the world's arhants, or among those on the way to arhantship?" Great King, as a layman, you enjoy sense pleasures. You live amid the encumbrance of children. You employ Benares sandalwood. You wear garlands, scents, and unguents. You use gold and silver. It is hard for you to know if people are arhants or on the way to arhantship. A man's virtue is to be known by living with him, and then only if we attend, not a little over a long period. If we neither fail in attention nor lack understanding. One's purity is to be known by talking with him. A man's fortitude is to be known in times of adversity. Man's understanding is to be known by discussing with him, and then only if we attend, not a little, over a long period, if we neither fail in attention nor lack understanding. It is wonderful, Lord, it is marvelous how well the Blessed One has expressed that. There are men, agents of mine, who come to me still disguised as common robbers after they have been spying in the countryside. At first I am deceived by them, and only afterwards I realize who they are. But once they have cleaned off all that dirt and dust and are well bathed and anointed, with their hair and beards trimmed and dressed in white clothes, they enjoy themselves surrounded by all the 5 kinds of sensual desires. Knowing the meaning of this, the Blessed One uttered this exclamation. It is hard to know man by his appearance, nor can you judge him on a passing glance. The unrestrained can go about this world, wearing the guise of men that are restrained. For there are some who, hidden by a mask, glitter without and are corrupt within, like jewels counterfeited out of clay, or copper farthings with a plate of gilt. So King Bimbisara was a stream enterer, and he was quite discerning. King Pasanno, in many of the stories, he had a lot of faith in the Buddha, but he does come across as not so discerning at times. His queen was a stream enterer, and and very discerning. So she was a great kind of held him in check. Okay, the next sutta is Anguttara 3, sutta number 65, which is the Kalama Sutta. Of course, which is very well known. The Blessed One was once wandering by stages in the Kosala country with a large number of bhikkhus. He arrived at a town belonging to the Kalamans called Kesaputta. When the Kesaputtians heard that the Blessed One had arrived, they went to him and they asked him, "Lord, some monks and Brahmins come to Kesaputta and they expound only their own tenets while they abuse and rend and censure and rail at the tenets of others. And other monks and Brahmins come to Kesaputta, and they too expound only their own tenets, while they abuse and rend and censure and rail at the tenets of others. We are puzzled and in doubt about them, Lord. Which of these revered monks has spoken truly and which falsely?" You may well be puzzled, Kalamans. You may well be in doubt, for your doubt has arisen precisely about what ought to be doubted. Come, Kalamans, do not be satisfied with hearsay or with tradition or with legendary lore or with what has come down in your scriptures or with conjecture or with logical inference or with weighing evidence or with liking for a view after pondering over it, or with someone else's ability, or with a thought. The monk is our teacher. When you know in yourselves these ideas are unwholesome, liable to censure, condemned by the wise, being adopted and put into effect, they lead to harm and suffering, then you should abandon them. How do you conceive this, Kalamans? When lust arises in a person, is it for good or evil? For evil, Lord. Now it is when a person is lustful and he is overcome by lust, with his mind obsessed by lust, that he kills breathing things, that he takes what is not given, commits adultery, speaks falsehood, and gets others to do likewise, which will be long for his harm and suffering. Even so, Lord, how do you conceive this, Kalamans? When hate arises in a person, when delusion arises in a person. Let me list that whole sequence of logic. Even so, Lord, how do you conceive this, Kalamans? Are these things wholesome or unwholesome? Unwholesome, Lord. Censurable or blameless? Censurable, Lord. Condemned or commended by the wise? Condemned by the wise, Lord. Being adopted and put into effect, do they lead to harm and suffering, or do they not? Or how does it appear to you in this case? Being adopted and put into effect, Lord, they lead to harm and suffering. So it appears to us in this case. So, Kalamans, those are the reasons why I told you. Come, Kalamans, do not be satisfied with hearsay or with tradition or with legendary lore or with what has come down in your scriptures or with conjecture or with logical inference or with weighing evidence or with liking for a view after pondering over it or with someone else's ability or with the thought, the monk is our teacher. When you know in yourselves these things are unwholesome, then you should abandon them. Come, Kalamans, do not be satisfied with hearsay and so forth, or with the thought, the monk is our teacher. When you know in yourselves these things are wholesome, blameless, commended by the wise, being adopted and put into effect, they lead to welfare and happiness, then you should practice them and abide in them. How do you conceive this, Kalamans? When non-lust arises in a person, is it for good or for evil? For good, Lord. Now it is when a person is not lustful and he is not overcome by lust and his mind is not obsessed by lust, that he does not kill breathing beings or take what is not given or commit adultery, or speak falsehood, or get others to do likewise, which will belong for his welfare and happiness. Even so, Lord. How do you conceive this, Kalamans? When non-hate arises in a person, when non-delusion arises in a person, even so, Lord. How do you conceive this, Kalamans? Are these things wholesome or unwholesome? Wholesome, Lord. Sensuable or blameless? Blameless, Lord. Condemned or commended by the wise? Commended by the wise, Lord. Being adopted and put into effect, do they lead to welfare and happiness, or do they not? Or how does it appear to you in this case? Being adopted and put into effect, Lord, they lead to welfare and happiness, so it appears to us in this case. So, Kalamans, those are the reasons why I told you. Come, Kalamans, do not be satisfied with hearsay, and so on through all that, or with the thought, the monk is our teacher. When you know in yourselves these things are wholesome, then you should practice them and abide in them. Now, when a noble disciple is in this way, free from covetousness, free from ill will, and undeluded, then, fully aware and mindful, he abides with a heart imbued with loving kindness, extending to one quarter, likewise to the second quarter, likewise to the third quarter, likewise to the fourth quarter, so above, below, around, and everywhere, and to all as to himself. He abides with a heart imbued with abundant, exalted, measureless loving kindness, unhostile, unafflicted by ill will, extending to the entire world. He abides with a heart imbued with compassion. He abides with a heart imbued with gladness. He abides with a heart imbued with equanimity, extending to the entire world. With his heart thus unhostile and unafflicted by ill will, thus undefiled and unified, a noble disciple here and now acquires these four comforts. He thinks, if there is another world, and there is fruit and ripening of actions well done and ill done, then it is possible that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might be reborn in a heavenly world. This is the first comfort acquired. But if there is no other world, and there is no fruit and ripening of actions well done and ill done, then here and now in this life I shall be free from hostility, affliction, and anxiety, and I shall live happily. This is the second comfort acquired. If evil befalls one who does evil, then since I have no evil thoughts of anyone, how shall evil deeds bring suffering to me, doing no evil? This is the third comfort acquired. But if no evil befalls one who does evil, then I know myself to be pure in this life on both these counts. This is the fourth comfort acquired. So, of course, that's a extremely well-known, or much quoted sutta, and particularly in the West, with Buddhism fairly new, and we were talking the other day about, what was it, fakebuddhaquotes.com or something. So that's a kind of the Kalama Sutta kind of usually gets maybe not quoted as the Kalama Sutta, but it's like Ajahn Jeff does an essay on he said quotes from this passage come in many shapes and sizes. Some of them are short sound bites, like the message that was rubber stamped on an envelope of a letter I once received, and I say, follow your own sense of right and wrong, the Buddha. And And then another, he said, there's also a desktop wallpaper. Believe nothing, no matter who said it, not even if I said it. If it doesn't fit in with your own reason and common sense, the Buddha. So, so, um, so that isn't quite what the Kalama Sutta is presenting, and I thought I would Bhikkhu Bodhi, and because it is tends to be out there, tends to be known, and then tends to be referred to. I thought I would read this a little essay by Bhikkhu Bodhi, because he explains it quite nicely, and has a very of course his mind is so sharp and clear. It's really helpful. Okay, so we take a fresh. So it's just called a look at the Kalama Sutta. Okay, we take a fresh look at an oft-quoted discourse of the Buddha, the Kalama Sutta. The discourse has been described as, quote, the Buddha's charter of free inquiry, unquote. And though the discourse certainly does counter the decrees of dogmatism and blind faith with a vigorous call for free investigation, it is problematic whether the sutta can support all the positions that have been ascribed to it. On the basis of a single passage quoted out of context, the Buddha has been made out to be a pragmatic empiricist who dismisses all doctrine and faith, and whose Dhamma is simply a freethinker's kit to truth, which invites each one to accept and reject whatever he likes. But does the Kalama Sutta really justify such views? Or do we meet in these claims just another set of variations on that egregious old tendency to interpret the Dhamma according to whatever notions are congenial to oneself, or to those to whom one is preaching? Let us take as careful a look at the Kalama Sutta as the limited space allotted to this essay will allow, remembering that in order to understand the Buddha's utterances correctly, it is essential to take account of his own intentions in making them. The passage that has been cited so often runs as follows. Come, Kalamas, do not go upon what has been acquired by repeated hearing, nor upon tradition, nor upon rumor, nor upon scripture, nor upon surmise, nor upon axiom, nor upon specious reasoning, nor upon bias toward a notion pondered over, nor upon another's seeming ability, nor upon consideration. The monk is our teacher. When you yourselves know these things are bad, blamable, censured by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to harm and will, abandon them. When you yourselves know these things are good, blameless, praised by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to benefit and happiness, enter on and abide in them. Now this passage, like everything else spoken by the Buddha, has been stated in a specific context, with a particular audience and situation in view, and thus must be understood in relation to that context. The Kalamas, citizens of the town of Kesaputta, had been visited by religious teachers of divergent views, each of whom would propound his own doctrines and tear down the doctrines of his predecessors. This left the Kalamas perplexed, and thus when the recluse Gotama, reputed to be an awakened one, arrived in their township, they approached him in the hope that he might be able to dispel their confusion. From the subsequent development of the sutta, it is clear that the issues that perplexed them were the reality of rebirth and karmic retribution for good and evil deeds. The Buddha begins by assuring the Kalamas that under such circumstances it is proper for them to doubt, an assurance which encourages free inquiry. He next speaks the passage quoted above, advising the Kalamas to abandon those things they know for themselves to be bad and to undertake those things they know for themselves to be good. This advice can be dangerous if given to those whose ethical sense is undeveloped, and we can thus assume that the Buddha regarded the Kalamas as people of refined moral sensitivity. In any case, he did not leave them wholly to their own resources, but by questioning them, led them to see that greed, hate, and delusion, being conducive to harm and suffering for oneself and others, are to be abandoned, and their opposites, being beneficial to all, are to be developed. The Buddha next explains that a noble disciple, devoid of covetousness and ill will, undiluted, dwells pervading the world with boundless loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. Thus purified of hate and malice, he enjoys here and now 4 solaces. If there is an afterlife and kamic result, then he will undergo a pleasant rebirth, while if there is none, he still lives happily here and now. If evil results befall an evildoer, then no evil will befall him. And if evil results do not befall an evildoer, then he is purified anyway. With this, the Kalamas express their appreciation of the Buddha's discourse and go for refuge to the Triple Gem. Now, does the Kalama Sutta suggest, as is often held, that a follower of the Buddha's path can dispense with all faith and doctrine, that he should make his own personal experience the criterion for judging the Buddha's utterances and for rejecting what cannot be squared with it? It is true the Buddha does not ask the Kalamas to accept anything he says out of confidence in himself, but let us note one important point. The Kalamas, at the start of their discourse, were not the Buddha's disciples. They approached him merely as a counselor who might help dispel their doubts. They did not come to him as the Tathagata, the truth finder, who might show them the way to spiritual progress and to final liberation. Thus, because the Kalamas had not yet come to accept the Buddha in terms of his unique mission as the discloser of liberating truth, it would not have been in place for him to expound to them the Dhamma unique to his own dispensation, such teachings as the Four Noble Truths, the 3 characteristics, and the methods of contemplation based upon them. These teachings are specifically intended for those who have accepted the Buddha as their guide to deliverance. And in the suttas, he expounds them only to those who have gained faith in the Tathagata and who possess the perspective necessary to grasp them and apply them. The Kalamas, however, at the start of the discourse, are not yet fertile soil for him to sow the seeds of his liberating message. Still confused by the conflicting claims to which they have been exposed, they are not yet clear even about the groundwork of morality. Nevertheless, after advising the Kalamas not to rely upon established tradition, abstract reasoning, and charismatic gurus, the Buddha proposes to them a teaching that is immediately verifiable and capable of laying a firm foundation for a life of moral discipline and mental purification. He shows that whether or not there be another life after death, a life of moral restraint and of love and compassion for all beings brings its own intrinsic rewards here and now, a happiness and sense of inward security far superior to the fragile pleasures that can be won by violating moral principles and indulging the mind's desires. For those who are not concerned to look further, who are not prepared to adopt any convictions about a future life and worlds beyond the present one, such a teaching will ensure their present welfare and their safe passage to a pleasant rebirth, providing they do not fall into the wrong view of denying an afterlife and kamic causation. However, for those whose vision is capable of widening to encompass the broader horizons of our existence, this teaching given to the Kalamas points beyond its immediate implications to the very core of the Dhamma. For the three states brought forth for examination by the Buddha, greed, hate, and delusion, are not merely grounds of wrong conduct or moral stains upon the mind. Within his teaching's own framework, they are the root defilements, the primary causes of all bondage and suffering, and the entire practice of the Dhamma can be viewed as the task of eradicating these evil roots by developing to perfection their antidotes: dispassion, kindness, and wisdom. Thus, the discourse to the Kalamas offers an acid test for gaining confidence in the Dhamma as a viable doctrine of deliverance. We begin with an immediately verifiable teaching whose validity can be attested by anyone with the moral integrity to follow it through to its conclusions, namely, that the defilements cause harm and suffering, both personal and social, that their removal brings peace and happiness, and that the practices taught by the Buddha are effective means for achieving their removal. By putting this teaching to a personal test, with only a provisional trust in the Buddha as one's collateral, one eventually arrives at a firmer, experientially grounded confidence in the liberating and purifying power of the Dhamma. This increased confidence in the teaching brings along a deepened faith in the Buddha as teacher, and thus disposes one to accept on trust those principles he enunciates that are relevant to the quest for awakening, even when they lie beyond one's own capacity for verification. This, in fact, marks the acquisition of right view in its preliminary role as the forerunner of the entire Noble Eightfold Path. Partly in reaction to dogmatic religion, partly in subservience to the reigning paradigm of objective scientific knowledge, it has become fashionable to hold, by appeal to the Kalama Sutta, that the Buddha's teaching dispenses with faith and formulated doctrine and asks us to accept only what we can personally verify. This interpretation of the sutta, however, forgets that the advice the Buddha gave the Kalamas was contingent upon the understanding that they were not yet prepared to place faith in him and his doctrine. It also forgets that the sutta omits, for that very reason, all mention of right view and of the entire perspective that opens up when right view is acquired. It offers instead the most reasonable counsel on wholesome living possible when the issue of ultimate beliefs has been put into brackets. What can be justly maintained is that those aspects of the Buddha's teaching that come within the purview of our ordinary experience can be personally confirmed within experience, and that this confirmation provides a sound basis for placing faith in those aspects of the teaching that necessarily transcend ordinary experience. Faith in the Buddha's teaching is never regarded as an end in itself, nor as a sufficient guarantee of liberation, but only as the starting point for an evolving process of inner transformation that comes to fulfillment in personal insight. But in order for this insight to exercise a truly liberative function, it must unfold in the context of an accurate grasp of the essential truths concerning our situation in the world and the domain where deliverance is to be sought. These truths have been imparted to us by the Buddha out of his own profound comprehension of the human condition. To accept them in trust after careful consideration is to set foot on a journey which transforms faith into wisdom, confidence into certainty, and culminates in liberation from suffering. So those are some thoughts on the Kalama Sutta. Any questions, comments?
One of the criteria Thapati talks a lot about the same thing.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk about how we, coming from a kind of skeptical background, the role of the teacher and taking on things that we're maybe not sure about but are coming from a presumably trustable source. Can you talk about how we make those work together?
Well, I think it kind of ties into the previous one with King Pasanno, quite neatly actually, where it's one's say a teacher's virtue is you can't really know, but you can if you observe
closely and pay attention over a long period of time. And similarly with their purity and their fortitude and their understanding or discernment, all of those are that can only be known by discussion and listening and contact and as if we neither fail in attention nor lack understanding. So there's that sense of paying close attention and reflecting and developing of course that's also where how the Buddha places the like that Sodapati Anka, the factors of stream entry. The first two are the association with the superior Sapurisa Sangseva, that association with good people, and then Sadhamma Savana, hearing the true Dhamma, hearing the good Dhamma, so that contact and listening and study and then the internal reflection, Yoniso Manasikara. So those all play a role, and then it's then it is weighed in balance with because in the human condition, even if you're a great teacher, people are still going to find fault with you. And people are, there's lots of people left Wat Pah Pong and Ajahn Chah. I mean, lots of people left the Buddha. And so that it goes the case for every teacher. So that some people are, gain confidence and continue to stay with them, and others don't. So it really takes that commitment to training and reflecting, and as slowly confidence is kind of gained.
The Buddha comes up with the Buddha, like the monk, like, you haven't revealed any psychic powers.
Yeah.
I'm leaving.
I'm done. Completely unimpressive.
It seems to be human nature. I've even seen monks get up in public teaching Wat Pah Pong, criticizing him or Lena.
Oh,
yeah. Just seems to be ordinary.
It happens everywhere, through all periods of time.
So the next one is from the Lavinia. Now a certain bhikkhu was once sick with dysentery, and he lay fouled in his own urine and excrement. As the Blessed One was going the round of the lodgings with the Venerable Ananda as his attendant monk, he came to that bhikkhu's dwelling. When he saw him lying where he was, he went up to him and said, "What is your sickness, bhikkhu?" "It is dysentery, Blessed One." "But bhikkhu, have you no attendant?" "No, Blessed One." "Why do the bhikkhus not look after you, bhikkhu?" I am of no use to the bhikkhus, Lord. That is why they do not look after me." Then the Blessed One said to the Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, go and fetch some water. Let us wash this bhikkhu." "Even so, Lord." The Venerable Ananda replied, and he brought some water. The Blessed One poured out the water, and the Venerable Ananda washed the bhikkhu. Then the Blessed One took him by the head, and the Venerable Ananda took him by the feet, and they raised him up and put him on a bed. With this as the occasion, and this as the reason, the Blessed One summoned the bhikkhus and asked them, "Bhikkhus, is there a bhikkhu sick in a certain dwelling?" "There is, Blessed One." "What is that bhikkhu's illness?" "He has dysentery, Lord." "Has he anyone to look after him?" "No, Blessed One." "Why do the bhikkhus not look after him?" "Lord, that bhikkhu is of no use to the bhikkhus. That is why they do not look after him." "Bhikkhus, you have neither mother nor father to look after you. If you do not look after each other, who will look after you? Let him who would look after me look after one who is sick. If he has a preceptor, his preceptor should, as long as he lives, look after him until his recovery. His teacher, if he has one, should do likewise, or his co-resident, or his pupil, or one who has the same preceptor, or one who has the same teacher. If he has none of these, the Sangha should look after him. Not to do so is an offense of wrongdoing. When a sick bhikkhu has 5 qualities, he is hard to look after. He does what is unsuitable. He does not know the measure of what is suitable. He does not take medicine. He does not disclose his illness to his sick nurse, who seeks his welfare, or tell him that it is better when it is so, or worse when it is so, or the same when it is so. He is of a type unable to endure arisen bodily feelings that are painful, harsh, racking, piercing, disagreeable, unwelcome, and menacing to life. When a sick man has the 5 opposite qualities, he is easy to look after. So that occasion is especially if we're thinking of this whole winter retreat as a reflection and contemplation of the life of the Buddha. I find something like this takes it beyond the philosophical and the or even the sort of meditative prowess level of talking about the Buddha, but talking about his very human qualities and that looking after somebody who's ill, paying attention to how the community that is living together, how are they functioning, how are they getting on, how can they be looked after. So the Buddha is exemplifying that in this case, and then also something that is I thought very interesting, and this is a very good illustration of this, of the in terms of how the Buddha led as a leader. Okay, so he goes, he finds a sick monk who isn't being looked after, and says the Sangha says that bhikkhu is of no use to the other bhikkhus, but when he calls the meeting together, he doesn't sort of get up on the high seat and blast them for whatever wrongdoing, he questions them and makes it very clear. What is the circumstance? How is it? Because inevitably, even if it's correct information, it's still from one perspective. Oftentimes, in order to really get a good feel of how to respond to a situation, it's good to get as full a picture as possible. And that is really important in terms of any kind of human relations and say living together as human beings. We always function on partial information, and then that usually complicates things. So then trying to get a fuller perspective and information. There's one last sutta, or no, this is from, it's actually in both the Vinaya as well as the Anguttara, and and this is concerning sickness also. When a sick nurse has 5 qualities, he is unfit to look after the sick. He is not clever at preparing medicine. He does not know what is and what is not suitable. So he brings what is unsuitable and takes away what is suitable. He looks after the sick for mercenary reasons rather than with thoughts of loving kindness. He is squeamish about removing excrement, urine, spittle, or vomit. He is not clever at instructing, urging, rousing, and encouraging the sick with timely talk on the Dhamma. And when when a sick nurse has the 5 opposite qualities, he is fit to look after the sick. Those are really interesting qualities to be to recognize, reflect on, or understand. Yeah, this is looking after the sick. Are there's some who are kind of better at it than others, and then to be able to for oneself in looking after the sick, then one needs to take into account. Like I can remember, there were monks who came to help look after Loppa Cha, and they were kind of pretty incompetent, and because they were really intimidated by him, or also intimidated by the just having to deal with excrement and urine, and oftentimes, especially when Lompa had, because he had lung things happen quite a bit, so you get a lot of guk coming up out of his lungs, and you have to turn him on his right side, and you have to get rid of that, and there were several of the monks who were, a couple of them were senior, and they were just, and it was really hard for them, I think, also just to be, because they'd always treated Lumpur as as their revered teacher, and then to wipe his bottom. I mean, it's a different relationship, and it was really so. But yeah, we're learning how to look after, especially when we say as monks, as the Buddha says, we don't have mother or father, or we don't have relatives to look after us. We have to learn to look after each other, and that. And when you get, I mean, here we don't really get all that sick, really. I mean, living in the West, it's so kind of sterile. And so, but but still, people do get sick, and to take care to look after each other and pay attention to how they're doing, and what you can do to help.